Good night, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Tonight we will be doing Daniel chapter 7. But before we go on to Daniel chapter 7, let's do a quick review of Daniel chapter 4. Let's review Daniel chapter 4. When we were studying Daniel chapter 4, we saw a change in the attitude of Nebuchadnezzar towards man. You remember in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's attitude was out of this world. He said, for this cause the king was angry and very furious and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. So in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he wanted the wise men to tell him the dream and the interpretation. He said, listen, if you don't tell me my dream and the interpretation, I will cut you up. I will make your house a dunghill. Daniel and his friends wasn't even there, but Nebuchadnezzar said, we're going to kill them also. They were still in school, and Nebuchadnezzar was ready to get rid of them. And then in Daniel chapter 3, and whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So he made a statue. He said, you got to worship the statue. And if you don't worship, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace. So what we are looking at is Daniel's attitude towards his people. And he was a very vicious guy. Now let us look at Daniel's attitude, Nebuchadnezzar's attitude towards God. When Daniel revealed the secret, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and the interpretation in Daniel chapter 2, the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is the God of gods, and the Lord of kings, and revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. So what I'm showing you here is that although Nebuchadnezzar had his dream told to him and interpreted, he still did not acknowledge God as being his God. He said, Daniel God, your God is the God of gods. And Daniel told him, and when you read Daniel chapter 2, you will see Daniel gave a great testimony. And this was the first time Nebuchadnezzar was introduced to God. Daniel said, there is a God in heaven. And as Pastor Michael and I was speaking just a few minutes ago, we said Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar everything he needed to know in Daniel chapter 2. And had he listened to Daniel in chapter 2, he would not suffer what he suffered in Daniel chapter 4. All he had to do was listen. And Daniel told him, O king, everything that you have and everything that you are came from God. And he is the one who is going to show you the future. But Nebuchadnezzar did not acknowledge the God of Daniel to be his God also. There was a distance between Daniel God and Nebuchadnezzar. He said, your God is the God of God. And then look at chapter 3. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He had just seen God protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from a furnace that was heated 7 times hotter than normal. The people who threw them into the fiery furnace died, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived. Still, he acknowledged the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not as his God. So there's a separation between the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Nebuchadnezzar. He said, if anybody speak anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I will cut you in pieces, and their house will be made a dunghill, etc., etc., etc. So His attitude towards men was vicious. His attitude towards his people was vicious. And his attitude towards God was indifferent. It was Daniel's God. It was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God, not his God. But had he listened from the beginning, he he would not go through the things he went through in Daniel chapter 4. Now in Daniel chapter 4, we notice a change in him. Then came in the magicians and astrologers and Chaldeans and soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. Now this is all he said. He did not threaten to kill anybody. He just said these guys couldn't tell me the dream. And the next verse will say, and Daniel came in, whose name is Belteshazzar. He was a changed person. He also said, I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God has wrought towards me. So now he's talking about God and him. So by Daniel chapter 4, which was a number of years, at least 30 or 40 years difference, he actually came in understanding of God. And then the other thing he said was, how great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. He's no longer talking about Daniel God or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God. He is speaking as though he had a personal relationship with God. At the end of Daniel chapter 4, he said, I extol the God of heaven. That is the highest form of worship. So between chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4, there was a great number of years, and during that time, Nebuchadnezzar came to know God. So let's see what was happening in Daniel chapter 4. You remember this slide last week where Nebuchadnezzar said, in my sleep, I saw a tree that was great. I saw a great tree, and although the tree was already great, the tree grew into the heavens. The branches reached onto the ends of the earth, and there were fruits on it. The leaves were beautiful. The leaves were fair. All there was meat for all under that tree. The beasts of the field came and they got shadow under that tree. The birds of the air make nest in that tree and they lived. And the tree was amazingly big. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, I saw a watcher came down from heaven, a holy one came down from heaven, and he made a declaration. He said, hew down the tree, cut off the branches, shake off the leaves, let the fruits be scattered, get all the animals out from under the tree, all the birds, let them fly away. And they said, leave the stump of the tree. This was what Nebuchadnezzar dreamt. The tree disappeared, the branches were cut off, the fruits were done away with, the leaves were done away with, but you leave the stump of the root and put a band around it, a band of brass and a band of iron. Then when Daniel came in to give him the interpretation, he said, O king, you are that tree. You have prospered and you have grown, and your wealth have reached your authority and your dominion has reached the end of the world. This tree represents you and your life. The watchers, and in fact, before Daniel told him that, Daniel was shaken up for 1 hour and he was afraid to tell Nebuchadnezzar. And I believe that the wise men and the Chaldeans, they knew the interpretation of the dream, but they were scared to tell Nebuchadnezzar what the dream was. Because Daniel said, this dream is for those who hate you. This dream is for your enemies. And this is what they're going to do with you. And 12 months later, Nebuchadnezzar was walking in his palace, and he said, is not this Babylon that I have built? I built for my honor and for my glory. And while he was boasting, he heard a voice from heaven. O Nebuchadnezzar, today this kingdom is taken from you, and they will drive you from men, and you will be like an animal in the field. You will be wet with the dew for 7 years, or 7 times. And we interpret 7 times to be 7 years. Now I want you to, when you look at this picture, you will see, just give me a second here. You will see this creature here like a winged lion. You will see this creature here like a winged lion. That is important. That is important for our lesson today. And after that voice spoke, they drove Nebuchadnezzar away from men, and he became like an animal. His heart was changed from the heart of a man to the heart of a beast, and he lived like a beast for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar was restored onto his kingdom, and he regained all his authority and all his power. He said he had more authority than he had before. He had more power than he did before. He had a couple more victories. And then in the year 562, Nebuchadnezzar died. And we will be dealing with that for a little bit. In 562, Nebuchadnezzar died. He reigned for 43 years, and he was about 72, 73 years old at that time. The other hero in our story is Daniel. Daniel was in exile for 43 years, and he would be about 56 years old. So at the end of Daniel chapter 4, that was the end of Nebuchadnezzar, and we move on from that point. So that was a review of our last week lesson. Now the question is, why are we moving from Daniel chapter 4 to Daniel chapter 7? We are not going to study chapter 5 or 6. We are going to study Daniel chapter 7. And this is the reason why. Daniel chapter 7 verse 1. In the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream. Now look at the second verse. And this is Daniel chapter 8 verse 1. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me. That is Daniel speaking. So Daniel chapter 7 was the first year of Belshazzar. Then Daniel chapter 8 was the third year of Belshazzar. And then Daniel chapter 5, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before them. This happened 23 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar and the 17th year of the reign of Belshazzar. This is why we are moving on to Daniel chapter 7 and not Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5 takes place 23 years after Nebuchadnezzar died, and the 17th year of the reign of Belshazzar. That night in Daniel chapter 5, Belshazzar died. So then the question is, how did we jump from Nebuchadnezzar to Belshazzar? Who is Belshazzar? How did he become king of Babylon? So this is what, just give me a second here. Yeah, this is what we have to figure out as we go along. Now, Belshazzar began his reign in the year 556 BCE. 556 BCE. Now I give you two dates here. One date is 556 BCE and 553 BCE. We will go with 556 for the time being, and I will explain to you why I have two dates here. So 556 BCE will be Daniel chapter 7 verse 1. Daniel will be 62 years old at that time. And from the death of Nebuchadnezzar in 562 BCE to 556 BCE will be 6 years. From the death of Nebuchadnezzar to the beginning of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, will be only 6 years. So let's see how we got there. Now you remember in the year 626, Nabopolassar was the founder of the Babylonian dynasty. He started in 626 and he died in 605. In 605, that is when Nebuchadnezzar II, and he is Nebuchadnezzar II, when Nebuchadnezzar II started his reign. Now, the reason why he is named Nebuchadnezzar II, his grandfather's name was Nebuchadnezzar I. So we are not dealing too much with Nabopolassar. He died in 605. You remember the story about Nebuchadnezzar was on his way to Egypt to do battle, and he heard his father died. He had to turn back and go back to Babylon. He grabbed Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and a couple more kids, and he took them to Babylon with him. Although he started in 605, his father was already reigning in 605, so they do not count 605 as the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. They will tell you Nebuchadnezzar's reign is in 604. That's when he started. So in this slide here, we see 605. He died in 562. That was 43 years. So after Nebuchadnezzar died, what happened? His son, Amel Marduk, or his name is also called Evil Merodach, his son took the throne. But he reigned for only 2 years. And then he was killed after 2 years because people didn't like him. People wanted his throne. Now the Bible talks about Evil Merodach. I will show you a scripture in a few. The guy who killed him was Neriglissar, the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar. He ruled from 560 to 556. He ruled for 4 years. And then he died mysteriously. I think somebody poisoned him and he died. Then his son, Labashi Modak, or Madak, he was the son of Neriglissar. He took over the throne. He was only 13 years old. And they said at 13 years old, he was a wicked king. So a group of people got together and they tortured him to death at the age of 13. 2 of those people were Nabonidus, the son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar, and Belshazzar, the son of Nabonidus. 2 of them was part of that conspiracy theory, and they killed Labashi Modak, the son of Neriglissar. Now from 562 over here to 556 is only 6 years. And this is how we account for that 6 years between Nebuchadnezzar's death and how we arrive at Belshazzar. Now, Nabonidus, he was appointed king of Babylon. If you check on the computer, you will see Nabonidus as the last king of Babylon. Belshazzar was the region, the co-region of the king, Nabonidus. So his father disappeared and he was in control. He could not have done all the functions of the king, but most of it. So this is how we end up with Belshazzar in Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. So the question would be in your mind, whatever happened to Nabonidus? So let's talk about Nabonidus for a while. But before I do that, This is a verse that talks about uh, evil Merodach. It says that evil Merodach was the king of Babylon. In the year that he began his reign, he lifted up Jehoiakim, king of Judah, out of prison. Now, Jehoiachin, he was the last living king of Judah after Zedekiah died. And he was in captivity for 37 years. He was in prison. And when evil Merodach became king, he took him out of prison. He put him to eat on his table. He used him as his advisor, and he lived out the rest of his life. Although evil Merodach lived only 2 years after that. Now, Nereglessia was spoken of in Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 3 and verse 13. When Nebuchadnezzar took over Jerusalem, Nereglessia was one of the guys he appointed to find Jeremiah and take care of him and give him a choice. And whatever Jeremiah wanted to do, he could do it. And Jeremiah chose to remain in Jerusalem. Nereglessia was one of those guys. So the Bible never talk about Nabonidus, but it talk about evil Merodach, and it talk about Nereglessia and Belshazzar. So what happened to Nabonidus? When um, Belshazzar became king in 556, Nabonidus became king in 556. Nabonidus, he was a guy who was very religious. His mother was a priestess of the god Sin. And the temple for this goddess, the moon goddess Sin, was in Haran. And Haran was in Assyria. So Nabonidus wanted to build back this temple in memory of his mother. What we are talking about here is why was Nabonidus absent from ruling over Babylon? He wanted to build back that temple for in memory of his mother. Because when war took place, the temple was destroyed and his mother died. But because Haran was under the control of the Medes, uh, Nabonidus was unable to have access to Haran. So what he did, now you remember in 612, Amites, who was a Mede, and by the way, the Medes were existing long before the Persians. And in this slide, you are going to see the Babylonians, you are going to see the Medes, and you are going to see the Persians. So in 612, Amites and Prince Nebuchadnezzar got married. They got married in Asher by the wall, the city wall, where their parents, who was Nabopolassar and Syacrates, they made an alliance, and they sealed the alliance with the marriage of Nebuchadnezzar and Amites. Now, Nabonidus, he made a deal with a young king called Cyrus. Cyrus was a Persian, and in the year 552, Nabonidus told young Cyrus, help me get Haran, and I will help you get the Medes. So they made a deal, and it worked out so that young Cyrus overthrew Astyages, the Medes, the Median king. Now, what is amazing about this, you will see I say here, Cyrus the Persian overthrew Astyages the Mede and unite the Medes and the Persians in the year 551. Now, Astyages, although he was a Mede and Cyrus was a Persian, Astyages was the grandfather of Cyrus, and he overthrew his grandfather, and he united the Medes and the Persians together. So what you are seeing here is the Babylonian Empire was going down, the Medes were coming up, and then the joining of the Medes and the Persian Empire, which is the second empire after Babylon. This is what you are seeing on this slide. So after Cyrus won the war, he got the Haran. He gave it to Nabonidus, and he went off to build a temple in memory of his mother. And after he did that, Nabonidus wandered down south to a place called Tema in Arabia. And he wandered around for 10 years. So this is why he was absent from Babylon. And this is why Belshazzar was the king of Babylon, or the co-region of Babylon. So what I show you here so far is the gap between Nebuchadnezzar dying and Belshazzar taking control of Babylon. I showed you Nabonidus. He became king of Babylon, but he did not stay at home. He went to Haran to build a temple for his mom, and then he went wandering into Arabia to a place called Tema. He spent 10 years doing that. So he wasn't at home at any time. So let's go on. Our lesson for today, Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and vision of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. So previously, you had Nebuchadnezzar dreaming. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 1, you have Daniel dream with dreams and vision. So Nebuchadnezzar was dreaming in Daniel chapter 2 and 3 and 4, and now it's Daniel's turn. Daniel is having a dream upon his bed. Daniel chapter 7, verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the earth, of the heaven, strove upon the great sea. Now, you will notice this term underlined here, vision by night. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel talked about, I had a night vision. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, he said, I had a night vision. All that means is he had a vision by night. And he saw the four winds of heaven. And the Bible talks about the four winds of heaven at least 10 times in the Bible. The four winds of heaven was mentioned. The four winds strove upon the great sea. So let's check out the first one. I'm giving you 4 scriptures here talking about the four winds of heaven. Thus said the Lord, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. So the four winds brought the breath of life. And if you read that, Ezekiel 37 and 38, Son of man, can these bones live? And then he put sinew on it, then he put skin on it, and then he called out to the four winds, breathe on them, that they may live. So the four winds gave life. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 36. And upon Elam will I bring the four winds of the four quarters of heaven, and will scatter them towards the four winds. So again, the four winds are used to scatter his people, Judah. They were scattered with the four winds. They were scattered throughout the earth, the far ends of the earth, by the four winds. Then look at Matthew 24. They shall be gathered together. They shall gather together his elect from the four winds. In Jeremiah 43, he scattered them. In Matthew 24, he gathered them from one end of heaven to the other, from the four winds. And look at Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. There were four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth. Now, in this verse, it is called the four winds of the earth, not the heavens, that the winds should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on the trees. And it said, hurt not the trees or the earth till we have sealed our servants on their forehead. So you find at least 10 scriptures explaining the four winds of the earth. When they talk about the four winds, they talk about the four corners of the earth. They talk about the east, west, north, and south. This is what they are talking about when they mention the four winds. The second thing we're going to talk about is the great sea. The four winds strove upon the great sea. In prophecy, last time we talked about when you see times, and half a time, you are talking about 1 year, 2 years, and a half of a year. We are talking about 3 years. Add that to your prophetic vocabulary. Now we are talking about the four winds, and we are talking about the great sea. When you see the term the great sea in prophecy, you are talking about the Mediterranean Sea, like in the book of Revelation. The sea they are talking about is the Mediterranean Sea. But the other part to that story is when you talk about the Great Sea, you are talking about the masses of people. You are talking about humanity. You are talking about the crowd. So the Great Sea represents two things. It could physically represent the Mediterranean Sea, and the second thing, it represents people. So when the four winds are blowing on the people, it talks about confusion. What was happening at that time? You had the Assyrians fighting, you had the Babylonians fighting, you had the Medes fighting, you had the Persians fighting. So you had chaos and confusion. The wind was blowing on the sea. The four winds were blowing on the people, and there were confusion. And out of that, now this picture is not doing justice, but you have an idea. The winds blowing on the sea, I can imagine the four winds blowing on the sea. It will be a lot more serious than this, but you have an idea of what the four winds are like. Now, out of that four winds, Daniel chapter 7, out of that sea, Daniel chapter 7, verse 3, and four great beasts came out up from the sea. So out of that crowd of people, there will be four leaders. Out of that great sea, there came out four beasts, each diverse one from another. Now, at this point, I will start tying the book of Daniel to the book of Revelation. So in this next verse, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, this may not look like it, but this is the exact same vision. Then you say, how could this be the exact same vision when one saw four beasts come out of the sea and one saw a beast come out of the sea? Well, what happened is Daniel is looking into the future. Daniel is looking down the road. And as he looked down the road in the corridor of time, he saw four beasts coming up out of the sea. When John saw in Revelation the beasts that come out of the sea, this was the end of Daniel's dream. This was the last part of Daniel's dream, but it's the same dream. So this is where we tie in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation together. Let's go on. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given it. So, what are we talking about? The first beast that came out of that sea was a lion. The lion is the king of the beast. The lion is the king of the field, the king of the jungle. The eagle is the king of the air or the king of the birds. When you merge these two creatures together, you get a super beast with the power of a lion and the speed of an eagle. So Daniel was looking at this lion with the wings. And he said he looked at it for a while. How do we know that? I beheld till. So he was looking at it for a while. The wings thereof were plucked. So as he was looking at it, the lion, who had the power of a lion and an eagle, lost his power or some of his power. His power was taken away from him. His wings was taken away from him. And it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man. So you have a lion where the heaviest part of the body is the front of his body, his chest, his head, his mane, his big mouth, his big eyes is the heaviest part of his body. A lion standing on his 2 feet is a very uncomfortable position. So the beast that Daniel saw was standing on his 2 feet in a very uncomfortable position. And a man's heart was given unto it. A man's heart given to a lion, that's no good. That's not good for that lion because now he's not a predator. He's just a human being, or he has the beast, the heart of a human being. Let's go on. Look what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 4, verse 33. And the same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men. So when he was driven from men, what happened? His power was taken from him. His wings was plucked up. He did eat grass as an ox, and his body was wet with the dew, till his hair were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claw. So he lost his power and he was placed into a compromising position as a lion standing up on his hind legs. And let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him. So Nebuchadnezzar had a change of heart and he became like a beast. He had a heart like a beast till the 7 years was passed over him. So this first creature represents the Babylon. It represents Nebuchadnezzar. And we see in Daniel chapter 7, a man's heart was given back to the lion. His heart was taken away here in Daniel chapter 4. His heart was given back to him in Daniel chapter 7. Let's go on. Now, this is what Daniel saw. A lion coming out of the sea with wings. And then he saw the lion begin to stand up. And the lion was standing on 2 feet like a man, but the wings were plucked up. That was Nebuchadnezzar. This is the artwork in the kingdom of Babylon, and this is how they describe Babylon, a lion with eagle's wings. I have another one. This is Nebuchadnezzar. He's a lion with eagle's wings. So the first beast that came up out of the ocean, out of the sea, was Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. And behold, another beast, a second, like a bear. So the first beast is of a lion, the second beast is like a bear, and it raised, itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in his mouth, in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto him, Arise, devour much flesh. Now we will not be getting too far into the other beasts except the first one. We will be dealing with these beasts as we go along in chapter 8 and 9 and so on and so on. The second beast is that of a bear. It represents the Medes and the Persians. And I just showed you that the Medes and the Persians joined together in the year 551 under Cyrus. And this is a picture of the beast rising up out of the sea with 3 ribs in his mouth, and he was standing lopsided. And After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon his back 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So the third beast was a leopard, and this leopard had 4 heads and 4 wings of a fowl. Now the wings of a fowl compared to the wings of an eagle is totally different. Totally different. So we will not deal with this guy tonight neither. But this is what Daniel saw. Now he saw 4 beasts. Okay? So the first 2 beasts had 2 heads, 1 head each. This beast have 4 heads, so that is 6 heads. And then the next beast will make it 7 heads. Let's go on. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, no to decay. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. That is important that we note that it had 10 horns. So this 4th beast was different than all the beasts that was before it, and it had 10 horns. This is what that 4th beast would look like, or at artist rendition. Now look at Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up from the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. What I want you to see here is Daniel was looking at a combination of these 4 creatures, and it had 7 heads. I told you there were 4 beasts, and they had 4 heads. One had 4 heads, 4 beasts, but one of the beasts had 3 heads extra. So when you take that 4 heads plus 3 heads, this is how you get 7 heads. But Daniel agreed and John agreed it had 10 horns. That is important. We will be looking deeply into that. Let's go on. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Now we saw the leopard in Daniel. And his feet were like the feet of a bear. We saw the bear in Daniel. And his mouth as the mouth of a lion. We saw the lion in Daniel. But the source of their power is not of themselves, but is of the devil. The dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So this beast that Daniel is looking at is a combination of that 4 beasts in the book of Daniel chapter 7. But the source of their power is the dragon, the devil himself. And this is what that beast would look like. You will see the mouth of a lion, a bear, the head of the leopard, and it has 10 horns and it has 10 crowns. This is the beast that John saw in the book of Revelation. Now, Daniel chapter 7 verse 17 said, these great beasts which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. So we saw Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts, and we get the interpretation of what the 4 beasts means. The 4 beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise from the earth. They are 4 kings. Now let us take a look in this sense. Do you remember in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar saw this vision? He saw the statue the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, brass, and iron and clay at the bottom. This is what Daniel saw. I'm sorry, Nebuchadnezzar saw. Now, God is looking at the exact same thing that Nebuchadnezzar saw. Nebuchadnezzar saw world government as a beautiful statue made of gold and silver and brass and iron. When God looked at the same thing, he saw four beasts. The head of gold that Nebuchadnezzar saw was a lion with wings. The chest, made of silver, was a bear with three ribs in his mouth. The waist and the thigh of brass was a leopard with four heads and four wings. And the iron legs was this creature in the corner here. So when God looked at world government, he saw these four beasts coming up out of the earth or out of the sea or out of the masses of people. When man see the world government, he see a great beautiful statue. So that's the difference between God and man. He sees beast in government, man sees beauty in government. Now let's take a closer look at this. The head in Daniel chapter 2 was the head of gold. The head of gold, thou art this head of gold. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. In chapter 4, when he saw the great tree, he said, it is thou, O king, art grown and become strong. So the great tree in chapter 4 was Nebuchadnezzar. And the beast, the lion with the wings, these great beasts are four kings, which the first will be Nebuchadnezzar. So today we are just scratching the surface, and I want you to take your time, read, reread, and get this lesson into your heads so that we are building upon this lesson. And we will be comparing the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation as we go along. So the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar was so linked to Babylon that the name is used interchangeably. But the head of gold was Babylon. The lion was Babylon, but it also was represented by Nebuchadnezzar. The tree was the Babylonian Empire, but it also represented by Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon was used interchangeably. So the head of gold, the great tree, and the lion were Nebuchadnezzar. Now next week, we will be continuing Daniel chapter 7. I want you to, just in case anybody want to become students of prophecy, this is a very good place to start, where you start at the very basic, you start at the ground level, and then we can build on this. I promise you it is going to get more and more difficult as we get into the rest of Daniel chapter 7, chapter 8, and I still have some more stories to tell you about Cyrus and how he came into being and how he became the great one. And we would, as we go along, we would see these things in these four creatures. And then we will merge them together in the book of Revelation. So for today, we will stop at Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, and we dealt with the four creatures that came out of the sea. And the four creatures, remember Daniel chapter 7 verse 17, these four beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. This is what we'll be studying next time. And at this time, I will turn over to Pastor Michael. And thank you very much for your time.